Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and we are awake again after roughly a 5-hour nap in between posting the live stream coverage video and when I woke up, because it's after that now. But I've eaten, I've, had lunch, I've had a chance to sit down and, peruse the comments and take a look at the live stream and the global dev diary to glean, I guess, some additional information out of this alongside talking about the skill fusions, which we'll lead off with because that's what the thumbnail is all about, is the skill fusions. So these 5 units will be the other featured units on the banner that comes out in about 54, 55 hours or so. October 30th, so obviously it's October 28th. We've got a while until that drops, but these will be the 5 featured units alongside the Lumi, Lumi, Violet, and Rimuru. And they look to be okay. I'm sorry about the grainy image, but the image that they showed on stream wasn't really that much better, and that's why it's grainy in the first place. But bear with me, I do have these translated. So, Benimaru, let's pull him up. Let's just pull all these units up, and then we can go over what they currently do and what they will do in English. So, Benimaru's first skill got the update. So, he has the 30% attack buff and the orange damage increase by 10% for 1 turn. That has now changed to a 40% attack buff and a 50% orange damage buff for 1 turn. So that's fairly powerful, especially being an older unit. 10% here doesn't really do him too much. He's an okay AoE fire nuker if you don't have any other option, but obviously he is an OG unit. But 50% fire damage up, that is not something to underestimate on an orange team, especially with he's magic, so you could put him under the new Milim and he would get the Pierce buff as well. So that would just enhance the damage even more. It's not as much as Shinsha's 100% on oranges, but let's be fair, she's brand new EX unit. So I would give him initially a solid like B, I guess. Space Rimuru is next, and his looks to be probably the best out of the bunch. So Rimuru has always been, ever since the game originally came out, he's always been one of the initial reroll targets for players because he's a very generic support, attack, and defense if I had it leveled up all the way. Surprisingly, I didn't know I didn't have that leveled up all the way. But the 40% all allies attack 40% is a very good skill, and they are making it a little bit better. So it used to be 40%, it's still 40%, but now it's adding an AoE alt resistance down by 30% for 1 turn for the same cost, still 55 points, which is pretty powerful. It's a very significant increase in support for a very old character. Like, Rimuru was never going to be like the biggest damaging unit. He's balance growth. His AoE is not that strong, but the support he can bring to a team, especially being an OG unit and one that you can get off the tutorial multi. I mean, granted, again, all these units have to be level 100, so it's not really free to play. But for players who do have him and haven't really used him that much, this buff and debuff now could give you quite a bit of additional power when combined with a lot of the other big time buffs that we have. So I'd give him a solid A for his skill fusion, one of the rare ones that actually do fairly well. Water Soe is next. Now, Water Soe is not really used all that much because he's really here for his trait, the starting skill points. His other skills are not really that viable. You can use him for random stages that need an orb change, but there's a couple free-to-play options that do that now, and they're free. But they're changing his defense skill. So he started at, 25% at level 10, because I don't have it maxed out. Yeah, 25% defense, and then 5% blue damage until the end of battle, which stacks. Blue orb damage? Sure, why not? I don't really care. This is a defense skill first and foremost. Well, they're going to double down on that, because now it's going to a 2-turn 30% defense buff. So it's added an extra turn. It's added an extra 5% to the buff itself. So, I mean, multiple turn buffs are good. And then his secondary effect has been completely changed away from the blue orb damage. And now it is a AoE attack power down on the enemy. So it is doubling down on the whole defensive options, because now he's giving you extra defense for multiple turns. He's also lowering the enemy's attack for multiple turns. So either way, you're going to take less damage. So, I mean, he could be good on, say, the Vengeance team now, because they're all about defense. Raphael's giving guard and sealing everything. Soe is a green orb changer from oranges, so you don't have to bring Wind Veldora or one of the free-to-play units. You could bring Water Soe and maybe start with some additional skill points then, because, you know, to skill fuse him, he'd have to be level 100. So you'd have his full trait. And then you'd be lowering the attack power of the enemy for multiple turns, and you'd be giving yourself defense for multiple turns. So Soe on the Vengeance team, I think, is going to be a very, very useful unit. So I would also give him, I think, like an A-, because outside of the Vengeance team, he's not really going to see much use. Like, you're not going to use him for his skill fusion. He's really going to be there for the trait. But the Vengeance team, being as powerful as it is definitely a place where he could shine. So you can bet your sweet butts that I'm going to do a skill fusion showcase on him quickly. Probably more quickly than the ones I have scheduled right now, because they aren't that great. Moving on, Earth Lumi. She got a change. I don't know if I would call it great, but it is useful. So they changed her ult denial. So decreases single target's ult gauge by 10%. This can save you on multiple runs. Harmonizer Water Rimuru also has this skill, and that's how we were able to survive the E Inferno 3 beatdown battle using the Vengeance team, because we would just never let him ult. It's the same skill. Valentine also has an additional effect where she gives herself 25% ult gauge for free every time you use this. So you're essentially taking their ult away and giving it to yourself. Now 25% isn't that much, but they went ahead and solved it, because now it is still the 10% down on the ult gauge, so that hasn't changed. But now she's giving herself 40% ult, which is much more significant. And they've lowered the cost down to 15 points. Lower than 40. That is a significant reduction in cost for a skill that it was kind of a throwaway. Like, you could use it. You didn't really use it, though. It is what it is. But a 15 cost skill is now, it's peanuts at this point for most teams. She's still not the hardest hitting unit in the game because she's very old, but I mean, you could get a cheap denial now. I mean, I think Harmonizer Rimuru will still probably beat her out if you're going to bring her for the denial, because he does have it plus the healing skill. But if the healing skill's sealed, then you could just bring Valentine now, and it's even cheaper. But it also does set a precedent for, if this Rimuru does get a skill fusion, will they also change his ult denial, lower it to 15 points, and give him some kind of secondary effect, because he doesn't have one on his denial. So, I mean, it's potentially, or they could just buff his heal. One of the two. He has options, because he's an old unit. But we could see a cost reduction in his denial as well, which could be interesting. So Lumi, I mean, I don't know too many people that fawn over Lumi for having ult denial. I'll probably give her like a C. The cost down is good. It makes it much more viable on teams. The 40% ult gauge is good, but again, she's not a mainline DPS unit anymore. So giving yourself extra ult is kind of like, meh, okay, cool, whatever. So I don't really see myself getting too much use out of this. Definitely not as much as these two. And then Violet, the newest unit. Still almost a year old, to be perfectly honest with you. She came out in December, so not too far away from her release from a year ago. And, to counter that, she didn't really get that much of a buff. So they changed her second skill, so she's still going to burn for 20%, which is 20% of the fire damage that the enemy takes over that turn. It will be reapplied. It's kind of like a much weaker Vengeance, like much weaker, and it only applies for so many turns. but she also has her own personal attack buff, and they're just giving that an extra 10% bump, which isn't really that impressive. She can still hit decent numbers, all things considered, but I kind of wish they had done a little bit more to her. Maybe increase the burn amount, increase the turns that it was burning, and given her an attack buff. Like, if this had been 30% attack and 30% burn, I would have been probably more okay with the skill, but they didn't really do that much to it. So, I mean, I'm going to skill fuse her anyways because she is still a viable fire damaging unit, but it's really not that impactful to her. So I'd probably give her like a C plus or a B minus. Like, you're still going to get a lot of use out of her, don't get me wrong. But as far as grading the actual skill fusion and how much it changes the character, it's pretty negligible. So I'm not really that big on it. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about from the live stream that I've had a chance to relook over is the categories that Rimuru and Violet are on. Now, obviously, they're both on the new Visions of Coleus team, which is obviously a blue stacking meta, so it makes sense for them. Rimuru is on Shizu's Will, which is technically the Protector Rimuru from the Konosuba collab. Like, he's not on the Adventurer force, but he is on Shizu's Will, and Protector Rimuru does buff Shizu's Will as well, so he'll get the extra stats. And he is a blue orb changing unit at most, right? He's not going to be a damaging unit. So he has viability on the Konosuba team as far as eliminating some of the RNG, because he can steal blue orbs for himself, and he can also change all the blue orbs that you're probably going to have on that team, because you're running Megumin and you're running Kazuma already, and you're going to give yourself a lot of that, those rainbow orbs, whatever they're called, Unity orbs. I'm going to call them rainbows now. But, I mean, that, if you've ever, like, felt lost because you don't have enough alt gauge for someone, I mean, those rainbow orbs will give you a bunch of that, especially off a 6-hand, because it'll give you essentially like a 6-hand of orange worth of alt gauge, which is going to be pretty significant. So he has viability on not 1, not 2, but 3 stacking teams, because he's also on Fount of Wisdom, which is Diablo. And, you know, he's doing the alt resistance down, plus the skill cap, plus the blue orb stuff. So again, he's on 3 teams that are very massively oriented towards blues. So he may not be, you know, the best damage support, but he can definitely help you get a lot of alt, a lot of skill points, and a lot of protection gauge for not a lot of effort. So I think he'll be good on all 3 of those teams, so we'll definitely try to show him off on that. But also, Violet being on Primal Demon means that she also fits under Diablo's leader skill, which means she'll get the attack and defense buff, and she can give a magic damage buff. Now, the thing about Fount of Wisdom is that they're mostly physical units. There are a few magic characters in here, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, like, we'll look at Primal Demon, we'll look at Fount of Wisdom, and then we'll filter by magic. And you have a few options. Light Raphael, still a good damaging unit. You know, Rain, single target. Shizu, single target. You know, bitch-ass Diablos. I mean, anything to help Raphael do additional damage can definitely help you out. But, I mean, she's going to be good for any Magic team, regardless of if she's getting the extra stat buff from Diablo. So I think she's going to be very, very good. It's just that she'll be even better on the Primal Demon team because she's going to get those extra stats, which will make her more tanky and able to do more damage. And since Diablo's alt resistance down is pretty generic, it will help everybody hit harder, including Violet. And now we move on to Lumi, which there are some concerns regarding Lumi's kit, because obviously as a blue stacking protector, and you're as a normal blue stacking protector, you're giving yourself 40 SP every time you use said protector. And that is pretty powerful, because turn 2, if you've got the traits lined up, you can have 2 stacks of Velzard or Rimuru or Diablo or whoever, And that's going to have you at now a skill cap of 180 or 160, depending if you use Diablo. So that is fairly good. On turn 2 for Lumi, you're going to have 150, which isn't that far off. It is 30 points less cap than one of the other generic stacking protectors, but it is every turn. But what people are concerned about is that because she only stacks 50 every turn, whereas using one of the other protectors, Full Hands of Blues, can sometimes get you double stacks of protectors, not every turn, but maybe every other turn, you can effectively stack your skill points higher and higher than what Lumi is going to be able to, because you're stuck at 50 every turn. And generally, you're nuking on around turn 8 or so. So you're getting 50 times 8, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 400, right? 400 extra skill points, maybe 350 if math is wrong, because you're already on turn 1 and you don't get anything. So turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, it's only 7 stacks, technically. So yeah, 350 points versus having Protector Rimuru, and you're going to be at like 500 or something, maybe, sometimes. Now, the question is, do you need 500 skill points? Maybe, maybe not. Having a higher cap means that you can use more expensive skills more often, so that can definitely be a factor. But we'll have to see how well Lumi actually plays out, not only on her team, but on other stacking teams, and to see if she can cope with the, I guess, restriction to her cap increase, or if it's really not a big deal. Like, we'll have to see. On paper, I see why people are concerned, but until we get our hands on her, literally and figuratively, we can only assume so much. We gotta test it out in-game before we declare it as total trash or not. Which I don't think it's total trash, but maybe less powerful than what we were hoping for. Alright, the last thing we'll talk about is very quick. This video is actually already longer than I thought it was going to be. But we have a new Cliche character, right? She's brand new to the game as far as a usable unit, which means free crystals, because she will be added to your interaction screen, because she's free to play. So literally everybody will have her, which means she will start at level 1, which means that you can just feed her gobs of food, and you can get her up to level 20, level 30, I don't know, depending on how much food stocks you have, and that is a literal butt ton of very free crystals if you have food. So I guess it's not totally free, but I mean, it's there for the taking, and you can always, grind out the Tempest Harvest when it comes out this month, probably a couple of them. We don't know what kind of food she prefers yet, but I mean, I think getting another character at level 1 and being able to raise her up to at least level 20, that's a decent amount of crystals just to toss at your face. So I just want to point that out and make sure everybody is aware that you have another unit that can give you a resource of free crystals in case you're really running low and you need that little last 10 or 20 before you can get that multi. So that's also something to keep aware of. But that's going to do it for this video. Just a few things I've noticed and gone back over, plus the skill fusions. Let me know what you guys think of the skill fusions. Do you agree with me that Rimuru and Soe are probably the best and the other 3 are kind of meh? Or do you have differing opinions? Let me know in the comments. But that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.